Hey, everybody. I'm Szczepanek. Welcome to Pianist Academy. Woohoo! That's my fake applause for today. How is everybody doing? It's good to see you all. I'm sorry we're starting just a couple minutes late. Hopefully you're all doing well. Welcome to Sir Wolseley with the first comment in the chat today. Sir Wolseley, welcome. And Calais, Dith, Nathaniel, Dith, you say are on time for once. You beat me. Oh, gosh. Bethany, welcome. Rob, welcome. Dave, welcome. C Drive. Good to hear you. Dith, I'll take that as a compliment about your reference to Gillick. I appreciate that. OCD King, welcome. And Antonio, Nancy. Hello, everyone. How are we all doing this fine morning for me? Many of you mentioned where you're tuning in from, but I think morning for some of you and maybe afternoon for some others. Late afternoon, possibly. We have a packed session today with 3 Masterclass segments. I'm going to hear from Antonio and Rhodsey, who I don't see tuned in yet, and Bethany. And it's going to be a wonderful stream. Can you tell? I was like running to get my coffee made. I started prepping for the stream an hour ago, and I still didn't get everything done. And I'm like, okay. Nancy, eating breakfast in San Diego. That sounds lovely. And bunnies are cool. Hello. Okay, let's jump right in. Antonio, you're first up. So we're going to listen to Antonio playing Almost Blue. Antonio, you sent me some sheet music for this, but it doesn't really match what you're playing. So as we listen to you play, can you fill us in? Did you are you playing some of this by ear, by listening to a recording, and were you using the sheet music as just like a reference? Because I'll show what you sent me on screen when we get to talking about it. But I'd love to know also, how did you come up with the rest? Did you pull it from another source, or did you do it by ear? Let us know. Okay, Antonio, let's take a listen. Hey, let's give Antonio a round of applause. Nicely done. I'll kick us off. Oh, yeah. Nice work, Antonio. Gosh, you've come a long way since the first video that you sent in to us. Really long way, both in everything that you're playing and your musical sense, what you're choosing to add and play. Really nice work. Yeah. Okay. I do not know this tune all that well, so I cannot improvise the melody for us to add, and the melody is not at all in the sheet music you sent over. But we're going to talk a little bit about. I think this is going to boil down to two main topics. So, Antonio, definitely not a thrashing, like you said earlier. Two main topics, maybe with a couple subtopics. All right. First off, let's talk a little bit about how you've arranged this. I'll play a little bit of what you sent over so people can get an idea of like the foundation you were working off of, and we can go from there. So, here we go. All right. That's a nice intro, and I believe you did play that exactly or nearly exactly the way it is. And starting in measure 5, you change things up. Something like that, right? I don't know if that's the melody, but I'm just playing around. Great. Okay. So, nice work. Everybody now can see that we have some of these chords have been fleshed out for us starting in 5 and beyond. But this part is written as a piano accompaniment for another soloist, right? So, Antonio, nice job taking this and starting here. Great. Your choice of chords, Antonio. Nicely done, but that's going to be the first thing we talk about. It seemed like a lot of what you picked was kind of taken from the right hand only of this arrangement. And maybe you changed things up a little bit. I don't know if I'd have to listen again to know exactly what the voicings were that you played. I think at the top of the arrangement, let's just think about overall flow, right? The top of the arrangement, it's really nice to have a thin texture. I think you did that really well because the left hand isn't doing much, and it leaves plenty of space for the right hand to do its thing. But I would challenge you, Antonio, to, as the arrangement continues, hello, Bedlington Groomer, as the arrangement continues, can we add something else? You were basically giving us like I think a half note pulse. So those were our half notes, right? Maybe sometimes we threw in a quarter note. When we get to maybe the second verse or the second time around, can we alternate? Let's start with that. Can we just throw in a bass note so that we hear the root of the chord? So that could be on the downbeat. So what I'm actually taking is I'm just taking what was written here and rearranging it. So either playing like that lowest A and then going up and then changing the rhythm a little bit. So perhaps we don't play anything on beat 2, but we shift that chord over to be a quarter note on beat 4 instead. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Right? Makes sense? All I'm doing is taking the information, and I'm not even changing it all that much, just pulling bits and pieces from the two hands so that we get a little more exploration of the depth of what the harmony is. We can start with a single note. Eventually, you could try to play that single note as an octave. When we play octaves, and Antonio, I hope you're doing this already. When we play octaves, be sure that, we aim for one finger. We don't have to aim for both. Pick one. That's our landmark or our focus. So playing an octave shouldn't be, especially if they're slow, they shouldn't be all that much more difficult than playing a single note. So playing an A here, or playing the octave, there's a little bit further the hand has to move back and forth, but it's not terrible, right? What can we do now, Antonio, even after that? So let's see. We're talking about the beginning of the arrangement. We keep things more sparse, kind of like what you already did with a rootless voicing in the left hand. Then can we add in some roots? Or even if they're not roots, can we show, yeah, that could still be something nice. Can we just show something that's lower in texture to help fill it out? That was number 2. Number 3, we'll say, can we do things in octaves? Once in a while, can we throw something in like that? The 4th direction, this would be the most difficult one. Can we throw in a little arpeggiation here and there? And if you really know the chords that you're playing, we're just sticking with this first one, which is A minor 9. Right? So if we're playing that, well, what if we throw in, and let's start without an octave, so just those pitches. All I'm going through are the main pitches in the chord. And if you're thinking this way, and I think you are, Antonio, because you've been reading lead sheets as well. So the component notes of A minor, add 9. We have the root in the 5th. There's the 9th and the 3rd. That's all we really need to show the whole chord. So Antonio, could you throw one of those in once in a while? Maybe at the beginning of a section? And then you could go back to maybe a more sparse voicing and then throw an octave in. Something like that. Okay. That's the first thing I wanted to mention, Antonio. I know that might sound, I hope it doesn't sound super challenging. I hope you feel like that's attainable. But it is a little bit of a challenge. Rhodsey asked, what are these mysterious chords? Well, that first one was A minor 9, and then that's with the 7th added. This would just be B minor 7, and then E dominant. I may have thrown in another extension in there as I was playing around. Dith. Dith seems freaked out. Antonio, how do you feel about that? It'll be a great way to continue your study of harmony. And it's already something, gosh, Antonio says it's doable. The last piece you played had octaves and jumps in the right hand. We still have some of those in this piece, and we're going to talk about those in a second. Great. I'm glad to hear that it's doable. Even if, let's say, if the arpeggiation and totally changing the voicing of the chord is too difficult to start with, where we don't want to spread it out like that much over an octave, what if you just start with a really closed position? So instead of this being, you could even start with this chord. Can we roll it? Can we start by rolling it? Yeah. So one of them could be rolled. That's like an easy way of showing some extra movement. And then what if we break up just this voicing into a little bit more movement? So not changing where we've practiced moving the hands to and from, right? Yeah. That would be a great way to start experimenting with arpeggiation. And when that starts to feel more comfortable, we can expand and have the left hand do some climbing. So what I'm doing there, especially with the left hand, I'm just reading the chord. So back on paper, even without a lead sheet, but you could add these in. Anybody could do this, especially if we're playing jazz or you want to improvise on something a little bit more, or if you want to create some more of your own arrangement, write in what these changes are. Right? And then, oh, that's major minor 7. So it's kind of has a walking bass line, A minor 7, and then B minor 7, E7, dominant. Yeah. Okay. So we could start by writing those in, or if you can just read them off the page. If you're a really good sight reader, you could just read them as they appear. Great. Antonio, you said the original piece had bass and drums behind. Yeah, we lost some of the rhythm that kind of keeps it moving forward, right? So great. I'm glad that you tuned into that. Okay, Antonio, that's part 1. That's a big challenge. I know Dith felt like it. Rhodsey says feels like it needs to resolve. Yeah, I've been ending all the phrases on a dominant chord. So there's your resolution, Rhodsey. Take it a little bit at a time, Antonio. And don't feel like you don't have to change the whole thing right away. Just maybe try, a measure the second time through. 1 or 2 measures. Can we throw in a little extra movement and see how that goes? All right. Second part, Antonio. I would love to see your right hand. This is a technical thing because everything you played, wonderful, wonderful study by ear, wonderful job picking out the melody. You memorized it. I don't know if you made notes about it or not, but nice choices. The right hand. I would love to see you get a little more free with physically what it looks like, because it's not only going to look better to everybody. We don't truly really care about that so much, but your phrasing is going to be better if the hand and the arm are free as you play. The first thing we can talk about is how you play your octaves, because we can kind of tackle that. Let's say we have just a little ascending line in A minor. What I saw you doing was a lot of poking. Freedom, yes, Antonio, yeah. So we kind of were staying locked in the claw position and then kind of poking those out. Those aren't exactly the notes you played, but just for demonstration's sake. Right. And what we'd love to see, first, can the wrist get involved? So that even as we play just the simple 3-note line. Oh, good, Antonio. I'm glad you're working on him. So start with some wrist freedom. Okay. And for now, if you're afraid of playing wrong notes, and that's why we're staying kind of locked, because we're trying not to go like that or play some strange second or minor second. If that's the concern, okay, let's take this one step at a time. So start with freedom in the wrist, and I am keeping the fingers more in the shape of that octave. The second step is going to be at least let the fingers relax after we play one, so that we're always passing through that shape to the next and to the next. Right? It'll take a little time. You'll have to go slowly. but that's going to help. So from the side, now you can also see there's wrist movement that we incorporated first, and now the hand is also relaxing between each of these. Yes. Antonio, let's just stick with those two. I don't want to overwhelm you with any extra technical stuff. If we can get those two things to start working with the wrist and the hand returning to neutral and to a relaxed place, it's going to feel a lot better to play. I promise. The secondary thing that's related to this is that all of your single line passage work, I would love to see the wrist shape the phrase the way you want to, the way your ear is telling you you want to. So instead of just moving around, with the single notes, we're kind of doing the same thing as you were with the octaves. We're doing a little poking on each one, and the hand is moving around laterally. That's good. Can we get there in a more fluid motion? So if we're going to play something like that, which is reaching an octave with a release. So, yeah. So I'm making a wrist circle. Antonio, do you have the Hand and Faber book? Because if you don't, that would be a great thing to get. Because it'll teach you exactly this in some notes that you don't have to think so hard about what it is that you're playing about or about what you have to remember. But wrist circles, lower wrist circle, releasing, all of that stuff. If you don't want to go ahead and play exercises like these and work on that, that's fine. You can still work on it in this piece and in the others you're playing. It just might be a little more complicated because you have to think about the notes and the rhythm that you're playing, right? So that is up to you. But I would say, anytime, can we get the wrist more involved, and can we show physically, can we show the phrase that you're intending to play? And if we can do that, things are going to feel much more natural. And I bet, as a byproduct, I bet that the phrase is going to be more fluid and flowing as well. Antonio, that wraps up my comments for you. Really good work. Really good work. Yeah. So see if we can work on some of the arrangement itself and adding in more left-hand movement at some point. Yeah, you say I hit all the sore spots. So see if we can add, and don't try to do this all in one day or even in 1 week. You know, work on one thing at a time. Work on some of the arrangement components one day or for a couple days. Work on some of the freedom in the octaves on another day. No thrashing, David. That's right. Oh, yes, Antonio. Antonio used this was a Steinway sample library done at Princeton that you said you used. I think it sounded nice. It was a nice balance. Maybe it could use a little bit more sense of space. I don't know if there were more distant microphones or, a little bit of reverb could be a nice addition to it if you wanted that. If you don't, because it's kind of jazz, and jazz is usually a little drier, I thought it sounded very good. Yeah. Antonio, speaking of the library, do you happen to have a quick link you could share? And is it a library to purchase, or is it free because of where it was done at Princeton? If that is something that you have that you can drop in the chat, I know there are people here that play on keyboards. I know especially Bethany likes to play with sample libraries and stuff. And that would just be nice to have that resource if it's handy for you. You can feel free to drop it in anytime. Why don't we go ahead and give Antonio another round of applause? Woohoo! And yeah, very nice. Yeah, it's a free sample library. I gotta say, that might be the best sounding free library that I've heard. So, yeah, very nice. Okay, Great. We're going to jump over to listening to Rhodsey. And the next part of this, the next part of the stream is going to be partially about composition and partially about technique. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Antonio. Rhodsey, which would you like to talk about first? Composition or technique? Welcome, Whitney, by the way. Welcome. And Catherine, welcome. Let's see what Rhodsey says. And I will pull up. So Rhodsey has written another piece, and I think we could call this an etude. Rhodsey, just tell me if that's correct. It's called Blazing Fire. Rhodsey says technique. Oh, and memorization. Okay. Okay, cool. So Rhodsey, that means we're going to listen to your playing. We're going to get to hear Rhodsey play. For those of you that have tuned in the stream before, we don't often hear Rhodsey play. We hear his music just played back by computer. So today is different. You say you're scared. Okay. Rhodsey, I'm not sure we'll listen to the whole thing, especially because I'm going to divide this into two parts. So we're going to listen to some of your playing, and then we'll probably listen to a snippet of the computer-generated performance just to get a sense of your intended tempo and kind of the flow of the piece. And yeah, and we'll go from there. So here is Rhodsey playing Blazing Fire, an etude, an original etude. Rhodsey, don't apologize. Everything's okay. We're gonna skip over. So that's about half of it. That's about half of what you sent over. Apologies that the little play bar was in front of your arms for part of that time. Could not get it to go away. Okay, let's give Rhodsey a round of applause because one, he wrote this. Two, it is quite difficult to execute. Now, you did say you didn't have a lot of time to practice. We're gonna talk about that. But yeah, let's hear it for Rhodsey. All right. Very good. Do you all, just a weird question, crazy question. Do you all have the applause like on I don't know, like not speed dial, but is it like saved as a favorite in your if you're on a phone? Seth, clap. Awesome. Because gosh, if I was on a stream and I tried to find that, the applause would be over by the time I found all of those icons. So anyway, good for all of you for having handy applause. C Drive says you copy and paste. That's why you're always second, C Drive, right? Yeah, Bethany. So, okay, if you give lots of people applause, there we go. Okay. Okay, Rhodsey, first and foremost, This is a great etude for lots of people. Many of you might be able to hear the relationship to, there you go, you just put it in the chat. You said this is your preparation for Chopin's Opus 10, number 1. First off, I think that's a great challenge for anybody. If you're planning on studying a piece of music that's, any level, that's difficult for you, anything that's going to be a challenge, and you write something to help you prepare for it, that is so great. So, Rhodsey, congratulations on that. And you, as far as I know, you do not have a teacher other than maybe me online. You watch some other channels, I'm sure, too, but I don't think you have an in-person teacher. Is that right? Hello, K-Moon. So, yeah, Rhodsey, just to tackle that and to give yourself like that goal, that's really wonderful. And I just want to point that out to everybody because if no matter what you're working on, if you can write something to help you prepare to play a piece that you'd really like to tackle, that is one of the best tools to learn. Because in the process, you're going to analyze the score of what you're, or at least by ear, you're going to know the piece that you're trying, that the goal is to play. You might look at the score, you might do some analysis of what happened. You're going to try to figure out what makes it difficult to play, and then write something yourself. Is it hello? Is it Dan or Daan? It is my house actually. Welcome, by the way. Okay, so Rhodsey, congratulations on that. Secondly, I think everybody could notice from the video that this was a mirror. So it looked like it was your left hand going up and down, but it was truly your right hand. Okay, across all of these arpeggios, Rhodsey, we're doing a lot of... Oh, Dan? Thank you, Dan. Thanks, Dan. And welcome. Rhodsey, you're doing a lot of very stretched motion. And no matter how much you practice this in preparation for Chopin Opus 10 number 1, playing arpeggios in this type of position, there are two things. Rhodsey, can you tell me, as you watch back yourself, and as you watch me do this, what are the two things that need to be better about the right hand position? So I'll show you again, both angles. So we have this is a problem. We're going to say there's three things, actually. So this is a problem. And same thing from above. What's wrong with that? Let's see if Rhodsey can chime in first. And then maybe in a minute or so. Hello, Alan. In a minute or so, we can ask anybody for relaxing between motions. That's a great start, Rhodsey. That's a great start. We can go further in depth into that. Yeah, if anybody else would like to chime in, what could be improved? This is how I like to have my private lessons too. I don't always just talk and say what's wrong, but Ricardo, welcome, Ricardo. Ricardo is an amazing concert pianist. You just made me a little nervous, Ricardo. Okay. Ricardo says, just relax. And, that does sum it up. David says, a bit too flat. More bridge. Great, David. Love that. Okay. Let's dive into that. People, you can continue to chime in if you'd like to. Ricardo, thanks. You're the man. Okay, Rhodsey. So, yes, let's take both what you said. Oh, let's see. K-Moon says the fingers need to flow without lifting up the entire hand. That's true. Arm shifts between positions from Roland. Welcome, Roland. All good things. More fluid motion, says Nathaniel. Yeah. Some of these we need more of than others, Rhodsey. So your lateral motion is pretty good. There are some places where we need to work on it, but for our standard arpeggios, you're moving the arm pretty well. So let's not focus on that to start with. Biggest thing, Rhodsey, instead of playing through all of our positions in each arpeggio with the hand fully stretched out like this, when the hand is fully stretched, one, fingers are really flat instead of being relaxed and curled. At least curved, not curled, but curved in a natural way. Right? Okay. So we don't need to worry about, we're not playing chords, Rhodsey, at least not during all of the arpeggiation. We don't need to worry about grasping all of that or some massive, thing that's even crazier. We don't need to worry about that. We just need to play Zavana. Welcome, Zavana. We just need to play one note at a time. No. I know. You're going to say, well, it's so fast. How do we just play one note at a time? The ticket is practice slowly, Rhodsey. I know that's not your favorite thing to hear. Fluid motion, yes, they are harder to learn without a teacher. That's why we're talking about it. So, okay, for each pitch, can we just take it nice and slow and stay in an optimal position for every note of the arpeggio? So, I'm not trying to play all three at once. I'm playing 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Yes? So we're eliminating the stretch and feeling this constantly, right? By doing that, we've also incorporated more natural curve in the fingers. So we're going to have a lot more control playing with the fingertips. Instead of, what happens is, when the hand gets flat because we're stretched out, it starts to feel like we're kind of like slapping at the keys. And that's always going to be full of tension, and it's not going to produce a good tone. It's going to be really difficult to speed up and transition from one position to another. So 2 things that have happened just by thinking about getting out of the stretch and back to the natural hand position and taking it slow enough to play one note at a time. By the way, for anybody working on Chopin Opus 10 number 1, this is exactly one of the best ways, I think, to practice it. I'll show you from overhead. Letting the hand stay relaxed. Even as we speed up, you see there are little moments of extension, release, extension, release. So, Rhodsey, if you really want to use this etude that you wrote to prepare for that piece, start practicing that technique. Okay? You start hands together. Okay. Oh, gosh. Okay, that's the first thing, Rhodsey. That's I think the most important thing to tackle with this. Get out of that stretch, let the hand relax, and practice way more slowly. Sir Wolseley, for anything that's an arpeggio at speed, one of the worst things I think we can do is think about finger legato and finger connection. Because as soon as we do that, if going back to the Chopin, because the Chopin is a really large extension, that's what makes the etude so difficult, is the large extension and how it changes. But it's not an etude that practices, and just like this isn't an etude that's meant to practice stretch. It's meant to help us navigate up and down the keyboard fluidly without doing that. Because as soon as the hand does this, and you try to play Opus 10 number 1, it's never going to be very fast. It's not going to be brilliant and strong. You're very likely going to miss a ton of notes, no matter how much you practice. But slowly, not worrying about finger legato, more worrying about letting everything relax back in. Yes, Rhodsey says this is meant to be arpeggios and a bit of left-hand octaves. Yeah, great. Zavana, yeah, Prelude 15. Yes, I mean, gosh, there are arpeggios all over Chopin, right? So same thing here. Even though these aren't, what Rhodsey has written aren't, I'll show the sheet music for a second because I don't think I have. And OCD King, thanks so much for the super. Thank you. Here you can see some of the sheet music. The tempo is very fast. And despite these being, let's say, only an octave span and not tenths or greater 11ths or very awkward positions like Chopin Opus 10 number 1, this is still a wonderful study in the same technique because we're still going to want to do the same thing. If I were to play this without pedal, that would be great for practice. And also notice, I am not worried about playing forte. That comes with time and with practice. If we try to play that strong too soon, that does exactly, it kind of pushes us in the wrong direction. Because it does exactly, it makes the hand do this. When we try to push more dynamic through a technique that isn't quite ready yet, we get tense and we make the claw, and then everything gets tight, and we're going to end up either causing other problems, causing technical issues, or we're just not going to be able to learn it as well as we could, and we're not going to improve our technique for sure. You say the mezzo forte section also teaches some voicing. Yeah, the claw. I need to get a graphic and a little animation that I can click. Okay, yes, so okay, that's a nice thing, Rhodsey, that you, compositionally, you added, I'm guessing it is this, that little bit, which is also not super easy to play, but that little bit is to let the right hand relax. That is a nice touch compositionally, and good for you for thinking about that, because then it actually does make this a bit more attainable than the Chopin Etude. So that's good because it becomes a stepping stone because you're only giving us a handful of measures at a time without a little bit of a break. We'll come back to a couple composition things later. Okay, the next part that I wanted to talk about, Rhodsey, this alone, you could practice this relax one note at a time, letting the hand move. Weeks of practice wouldn't be enough for anybody. It would be months for sure of practicing this until you really master the technique, right? And the technique, that's not going to come with just a little bit of work. That's part of the reason why, the Chopin Etudes are so advanced, and that most students wait so long before you try to tackle them. Thanks, K-Moon. Yeah, think of your hands as a ballerina. Yeah, I do like that. I do like that analogy. And Zavana says, please like the stream. Yeah, please do that. Click that thumbs up button, please. Okay. Next up. So, Rhodsey, don't underestimate the amount of time to spend practicing slowly and working on bringing the hand back to its natural position after every key strike. And if that means slowing the tempo down to here, then that's where it needs to go. There is no point in trying to speed up until we can play that technique, regardless of tempo, right? So if you speed up and if you test yourself and you say, I'm going to try to play a little faster, and you go back to record yourself playing if you can't feel it, and look at your hand, and if it goes back to this, we got to slow down and focus on light playing. Light playing, virtuosic technique is extremely about lightness at the keyboard. It doesn't, the lighter we play, the faster we can move around, right? Okay. Rhodsey, second thing. You wrote a couple measures here that are quite awkward. These ones. Those are quite difficult. I'll show them on screen because they don't look nearly as difficult as they actually are. We're talking about 15, 16, starting here and going across, 15, 16, 17, and especially from that point. What you did, compositionally, we wrote one hand position that moves, but because of the change in direction, and then quick change in direction, and the distance that this skips, so same thing here, change in direction plus big skip. Something that you might experiment with, Rhodsey, a different finger choice. And it'll take a little experimentation to find out if this truly is a good choice, but you could try putting your thumb, I'll put it in blue instead. You could try putting your thumb on the G sharp. Because if we can do that, oh, maybe not that one. Sorry. Maybe the last G sharp, yeah. Yes. So if we can get the thumb, oops, sorry, here, and here, and here, then when we need to change that hand position, we can actually reach the next E sharp, right? Because, yeah, what you just said is you found it easy because you're using 1, 2, 3. Here's the problem. Rhodsey, you just said that they were easy. Tell me the problem with this, though. Is that what you wrote? Is that? What is different about that than what you wrote down? Let's let Rhodsey answer this one, by the way. This is good. I get a moment to have a sip of coffee. Oh, going back, Nathaniel said practicing rhythmic variations would also help. Yes. Yes. This is ironic timing while Rhodsey finishes answering this. Because I actually filmed a short that's it's not out yet, but it's teaching Opus 10 number 1. So all what I think are the best, most important components to practicing it all in 60 seconds. I don't know. It probably won't come out this week, but next week, I think for sure. So Rhodsey, you could tune back in and you could apply the same things to this piece that you wrote also. So you said you thought this part would be about moving the hand precisely up and down using 1, 2, 3, and then you added an 8th note at the end. Okay, Rhodsey, yes. So you say I added an 8th note. Yes. Something like that. I changed the rhythm, and I created a rhythm that isn't there. I created a group, and a group, and a group, and a group. And if you go back and listen to your recording, Rhodsey, that is also what you have done, because moving from 2 here to 1 is really difficult to do. It's difficult to do at anywhere near the tempo that you have. That's still not 150, your goal tempo. And that's incredibly hard because we're asking kind of the thumb to tuck and move the hand almost the span of an octave. And so, first of all, if you play 1, 2, 3, you possibly might be setting yourself up to add this group unknowingly, when it needs to be completely fluid. That's what you wrote, right? Doing that with a thumb under G sharp here and then up. Let's take a look at that from overhead, because you have just created an incredibly difficult passage that doesn't have to be as difficult as it is. It might even be harder than all of the measures in Opus 10 number 1, because the movement from here to here is so large. I can't I was trying to watch the camera, and I can't even do that. So we have this reversal and then a huge leap. Right? But if we change the fingers, let's see. Here we go. Now, do we see how that looks almost like the first arpeggio? Where there's an expansion and a contraction while staying relaxed. Here, look at how concise, we'll say concise, in a closed position the fingers are. Thumb can play. We can expand to reach the next group and let the hand fall back to natural. Now, getting out of that and reversing direction will be a whole new challenge, but on the way up, that is so much easier to execute. And it feels a lot more like Opus 10 number 1 than, right? Okay. Hello, Greg. Greetings. So Rhodsey, yeah, take a look at that bar and go back and listen to the recordings that you make, because we want to eliminate all of that pausing, which is what's happening. Because this position is so easy, we can, you said, do it kind of like a flick. Well, if all we had to do was play in that one position and not shift, that would be great. But going almost an octave, I don't know if there's any amount of practice that would, if I pull up what 150 is. That would be unnecessarily time consuming to smooth that out. So think about changing those fingers. Okay. Those were the technical things that I wanted to talk about. Maybe really quickly, the octaves that you have at the end. We didn't get to actually hear you play these. Rhodsey, we're going to talk about that in a second. So, you wrote in the last couple bars, you wrote some octaves. We're going to come back to this when we talk about the composition, but Rhodsey, try to think of these as groups of 2 played as 1. So it's harder on the first because of the movement from black key to white key, but easier on the second to feel that this is actually a bounce. So it's a 1 drop and release between each. Drop, release, drop, release, drop, drop. It's harder going from black to white because the keys are in the opposite direction. They're higher and then lower, but we still want to feel the same thing. So 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So that in case you're doing anything like, which is trying to really forcefully play every one of those, we get out of that habit. So that passage becomes one of the easiest ones in the whole etude, if we've got that technique. You call it the trampoline octaves. Okay, so make sure that we're truly feeling 1 up and out, because I think if you really feel that, these are going to feel really easy, because you've given us, compositionally, you've made each movement of the hands down the keyboard easy to accomplish. This would be much harder if it was all 16ths or even all 8th notes. We'd want to practice in a similar way, but it would be harder to execute. Yeah, Ricardo. Okay, Rhodsey, let's shift gears and let's talk a little bit about the composition of this. First off, I want to give you a big congratulations because this compositionally, I think, is very well put together. You know what? To give people a little bit better sense of what you intend this to sound like, I wanted to play a little bit of the computer-generated recording. Again, we probably won't listen to the whole thing, but just a little bit so people can hear all of these pitches actually played at tempo, which I cannot do on a sight read. Okay, so we're going to just take a quick listen to this part of it, and then we'll talk a little bit about composition harmony. Yeah, Bethany and Ricardo, those are interesting references. Rhodsey, you said just play the ending parts. I'll skip over to halfway through or thereabout. And did you know, Rhodsey, the two references that Ricardo and Bethany have given, were those part of your inspiration? Let's see. Okay, we're going to jump into about the second half of this. Looks like there's maybe a minute left. Okay, let's take a listen. Okay, very nice. So now you can all have you have a better idea of really the challenge here. That's very fast. Yeah, Nathaniel, I agree. I agree with that. So Rhodsey, can't remember if I actually finished my congratulations before I started that, but I think this is maybe the best crafted composition that we've heard from you. So congratulations. Yeah, I especially like where we started. I'm glad we had an opportunity to listen to that because that's just a really dramatic and fun melody to play. I can't sight read it. That just shows you how difficult this is. So, okay, harmony-wise, Rhodsey, great. There are a couple things. Gosh, you throw in here early in the piece this B major chord that that's here. The B major just doesn't seem to fit to me because where we're coming from is, well, we do have C sharp major after an F sharp. Okay, those are nicely related. That seems out of place. So Rhodsey, I'm talking about measure 9. I think this would honestly be better if it was just B minor. So after we've played F minor, F sharp minor, even with C sharp 9, to me that sounds much more in the character of the piece and going F sharp, C sharp 9, and then that almost has to sound like a pop song to me. Like so maybe consider changing that D to a D natural. Personal preference. It's your piece, of course. really quickly here, this is we want to fix that notational thing. This should be an A sharp, not a B flat. Why should that be an A sharp and not a B flat? Anybody tell me? Rhodsey, you said you added B for comfort. B major is... Oh, Rhodsey, that's an interesting topic to bring up. Do we change a composition for comfort? I would change the way the arpeggiation is written if it's for comfort, but not the harmony you choose. The harmony should be really what you want and what works well and what ties everything together. And if we need... By the way, I do not think that B major and B minor are extraordinarily different to play. That's... If it's truly just for comfort and you'd rather have B minor, they're about equally difficult to execute. Bethany said, the right hand has an A sharp already. K-Moon, yes. Yes. These sessions, I've been doing live streams for about 2.5 years. They are all up on YouTube still. And they are in a playlist on my channel page. You can go and you can rewatch any at a later time. So absolutely, you can come back and you can tune in again. I just won't be here live, but okay, Rhodsey. Well, learn the B minor one. Bethany, you have the right answer about this. What we're talking about here. It is D sharp minor. The chord you've written. We'll make sure that's B, and then. Yes. Okay, Moon. Two things. If this channel's Pianist Academy, you can, if you find the channel page, you should find it just by searching Pianist Academy. And I have a ton of stuff out there. So I've got a bunch of live streams. This one will be included. Will end in about 1 hour from now. And they're usually available to preview or rewatch like within 30 minutes or so of the stream finishing. And you can enjoy the rest of the content that I've made for sure. Okay. Rhodsey, yes. Bethany had the right answer for you, Rhodsey, and that is the chord is D sharp minor. D sharp minor, it is spelled with D sharp, F sharp, and A sharp. It cannot be spelled any other way. The left hand needs to be written as an A sharp. Okay, because it's just D sharp minor in first inversion. So watch out for those things, Rhodsey. Correct and harmonic spellings of notes so that we are spelling the same harmony between the hands. Okay. I wanted to touch on compositionally. I wanted to touch on the spot that we already talked about for technique purposes. Rhodsey, diminished chords. Great. Yeah. I really don't have a problem with almost any of the harmony that you've written. I don't have a problem. I don't really have suggestions except that one major that just sticks out. Everything else, it's a interesting exploration. So, yeah, very nice. Back at this spot that we talked about for technical reasons. Or... It brings up a great opportunity to talk about why you wrote what you wrote. Because if we were to finish the diminished harmony, instead of creating a turnaround, that would be so much easier to play and to move fluidly through. So why did you write a turnaround? Now, if you thought it was to make it easier, okay, that's a good reason. We just would need to learn then that actually making it easier will be avoiding changing directions of a really fast arpeggio. So if instead we write just going straight up, it's kind of Lisztian in nature in that it's an arpeggio that crosses from 5 to 1. The hand is always moving in one direction rather than back and forth. Right? That would be easier. Now, because of the flicking motion. Okay. So it was a technical, so you wrote those for a technical reason. Okay. That's good to be paying attention to. So that's great. Oh, Ricardo, thank you. That's very kind. Rhodsey, so the next step is for being further able to identify truly what's going to be easy at your final tempo. Because this, while you were writing it or while you were thinking about it or while you're demoing it, if you're demoing it at 50% speed, it is very easy. It's when the tempo gets kicked up to what you intend that it becomes very challenging. So that would be a spot to think again about why you chose the notes. Because if you chose them to make them technically easier, we accidentally created an opposite effect. So good for you for thinking about it in the first place. That's great. But a diminished chord, so here's some justification. A diminished chord is already a smaller hand position, right? And if you don't mind not turning around, if the turnaround part of the texture is important compositionally, if the turnaround is important compositionally, then keep the measures the same because you want that change in direction and you want the spiraling movement that adds. Keep it, and we have to change the fingering like we talked about. If that change in direction is not compositionally important, it would be much easier to just write this entire diminished chord out. Just continuing up, not changing direction. That'll be much easier to execute. So Wolseley, love it. Love it. Okay, two more things. Toward the end of the piece, and the bits that we heard through, that we listened through, Rhodsey, you have some interesting rhythms that you've written for us, like starting in 26, the last measure that I'm showing on screen. A sharp. That's interesting. I'd really need to dive into what fingers to use to play that more fluidly. But my question is, why? Why did you offset this by a 16th note? And it's obviously on purpose because you continue to offset things as we get nearer and nearer the end. We have this little movement that's offset by an eighth. We have a couple 16th notes. We'll get it into the last section in a second. Yeah, Rhodsey, then don't change it if I'm just seeing that comment. No, don't change it, just for next time. Okay. So these little predictions rhythmically, to me, a lot of them sound like they should be before the beat and not on the beat or after the beat. In the case of this first one, oh, I even missed the first one. There. So we have this arpeggio. That one, I can kind of get behind the jolt that it gives us. At 150, it's going to be very hard to actually line that up. It would be line it up on a 16th note. It would be so much easier to execute if you just wrote it on the quarter note, and I think it would have the same effect. That's a great underlying principle of composition, by the way, for everybody that if you want to write or you want to do anything, there should always be a reason why you wrote the technique or why you wrote the rhythm, why you wrote the passage the way you wrote it. Yeah. If it's an etude, there can be a technical reason. If it's not an etude and it's a piece of music that is meant to express even maybe more, less of a study, more of an expression of art for art's sake, why did you write this offset by a 16th note? It better have some like really deep meaning. Otherwise, all of the increased difficulty that you add by just shifting that minute fraction of a moment in time, does it have an impact? Any impact on the listener? Rhodsey, yeah. This is the end of measure 22. So we're talking about all of your notes that you've shifted off a beat. If there is not a really deep and well-conceived underlying reason to write something that is so much more challenging than just, for example, putting this on the octave, which would be so much easier for everyone who's going to play it. I think your end goal, the sonic impression that we're going to leave someone with is going to be the same, whether you play it off by a 16th or on the beat. So this is on the beat, off by a 16th. The one that's off beat is much more difficult to land accurately. Okay, well, great. We have our answer, Rhodsey. You say you shifted them off a beat and didn't realize it. Well, that also then eliminates another talking point, which was kind of about the notation here. So we're not going to talk about that. Okay, going further in the piece. I would take, just for future reference, Rhodsey, just take a listen to why, by putting this, maybe this is an accident again, but if this is on beat 1, that's going to be the stronger accent than what comes next. What comes next is going to be like a more miniature accent. At least naturally, it's going to occur that way. Bum, bum. And not dun, da. And if you want the focus to be on the F sharp, E sharp should be the last eighth note of the previous bar. So, like that. Think about what you'd like. Yes. Sir Wolsey, you you have good eyes, Sir Wolsey. You saw the doggy. Okay. Chromatic suspension. Okay. I'll get behind that. Last thing then, Rhodsey, last thing is how you've notated. Nothing wrong with what you wrote. I like the octaves. We're talking about the very octaves at the end. We need to think about this notation is that's really messy. Because where's the beat? Beams always show beat. It's so important. I'm writing it down. Beams show beat. This should not be beamed with the other group. The other thing is, I think you may have actually written some incorrect rhythms here for what you intend. You might even want to write these, perhaps as instead of 16ths as 32nd notes. Perhaps. But starting us off, this has to do with, it's just muse score. Rhodsey, don't get in the habit of saying it's a problem with the notation. I'm sure MuseScore has a way of writing this in a more correct way. The simplest thing is that, first off, if we get rid of all that for a second, probably what you truly intend is that the G sharp is the end of the previous beat, and that this begins the beat. So our long notes are on beat, not off beat, right? Yeah, Rhodsey, this is super important. If you want other people to play your music and to play it correctly, beams show where emphasis is because the beat shows where emphasis is. So if we leave it beamed this way, it becomes... which is not. They're different. They're totally different performances depending on how you place notes across the beat. So if you want the emphasis on A has to be on the beat, which means perhaps if we leave the notation, if we leave the rhythm the same, then maybe this one, I would start like a whole new measure almost. Something like that. So we have a beat, and then we're going to make this like a dotted eighth, followed by a 16th. Sorry, the G would be in this measure, new measure, with the A starting on beat 1. So your last bar on the left side here, this would just be in 2, and then we would change. And if you wanted a big dramatic pause, put a fermata over the rest. And then that can take as much time as you'd like. Rhodsey, that's a great question. Sir Wolsey, great to see you. Okay. Rhodsey says, don't accents show where emphasis is? They do. They can sometimes overwrite the natural emphasis given by the time signature and given by beat. But throughout here, at least that first bar, there are no accents. Still better to write it correctly, Rhodsey. And here it's not a real big change. It would be changing our time signature and making sure that the note that we want to give the most emphasis on lands on a beat 1. Yeah, Alan. So when a composer uses accents, notation serves a couple purposes. We got to remember, a well-notated piece of music is going to be as easy to read as possible. That's why beaming has there's such a structure around what beaming is. And that's why it's important to maintain that, because as the better sight reader you are, we're kind of leaving Rhodsey's piece behind here for a second. The better sight reader you are, the more you learn to identify patterns on the page. You start to see patterns are very specific and they're very repetitive. And when we see 8th note and 16th note beams, or how they're broken, they mean really specific things. And over years and years of study, you start to learn that when you see a certain shape on the page, like a beamed group, the first note of the beam, almost always, the first note of the beam gets an accent because the first note of the beam is going to be on a beat. If it is misnotated, now we probably are very unlikely we're going to read it correctly in the first go around. Secondly, we're going to have to dive in more deeply to find out what it truly is that we're actually reading and how it needs to be adjusted. Sure, Rhodsey. So that goes for all music. This was kind of a little bit of a theme last time too, because when we were talking about the E-flat Chopin Nocturne, we were talking about time signature, and we were talking about how pulse relates to time signature. And there was a long conversation in the chat live about how it was possibly a waltz, and but it's in 12/8. Okay. Well, there's a lot underneath that, right? Because truly it's in 4, and there's a sub feeling of 3, but the sub feeling of 3 is not the most important thing. All of that, right? All of that comes up when we score something. And when we look at a piece like anything by a great composer, we have to look at all those little details in the score, the time signature, where things are placed. And we rely on it being perfect in the score so that we have the right idea of what the composer actually meant. I hope I'm not glitching too much. I'm seeing I have a little bit of trouble with the stream connection, so hopefully everything's okay for you guys. Okay, that's going to wrap up this bit with Rhodsey. Okay, Rhodsey, you said, should you revise this? No, don't revise it. Just learn for next time. Yeah. You could always, Rhodsey, you could always revise the sheet music a little bit, like what we just talked about. You could revise the sheet music to more accurately show what you intend without changing the intention, right? That would be something you could look at. But the rest of it, just take as a learning tool for next time. Let's give Rhodsey a round of applause. Because really, really, really nice work, Rhodsey. And we covered a whole lot of stuff. Technique and some composition stuff. So good work. We have another submission. Bethany has been waiting very patiently. Yes. Here's my little applause. Love it, Seth. Okay. Jumping over to Bethany. Bethany, yes, you are still here. I just saw one of your latest comments. Bethany has learned already. I think, Bethany, you've only been learning this piece for a week or 2 at most. Bethany is working on one of the new nocturnes from the book of 22 nocturnes that I recently posted on the channel. And you're learning the last one in the set, the Nocturne by Zoe Rahman. And so we're going to take a listen to Bethany. Something around there you say, yeah, good. Okay. Let me cue you up, Bethany, and let's take a listen to your work so far on this Nocturne. Lovely work, Bethany. Yeah, let's give Bethany a round of applause. Very, very nice. Wonderful playing. Great work. Just a couple weeks of study. Very nice. Yeah. As always, Bethany, we're going to divide this into two segments to talk about. There's a very, very short technique thing for me to mention, and then we'll get into kind of the more interpretive stuff, which I think that you were most interested in that. Yeah, Antonio, Bethany's got taste. Okay. Two things, Bethany, about technique. It didn't seem like it really affected you in your performance, but something to pay attention to. When we have these, yeah, Ricardo, lovely. When we have these larger arpeggiations or skips, and especially if you're using second finger, like here, I don't know if you were actually using that fingering for this particular measure, but it'll serve for demonstration. Sometimes, Bethany, when you're playing bars like this, which they are all over this piece, your second finger is staying stretched out and you're reaching for the thumb, kind of like that, where we're almost staying connected to both. Now, it seemed like you could do that, and that's wonderful. But if we would like to have extended control over what the arpeggio is doing, if we can add just a little bit of relaxation in there so that we can still maintain some of this shape, we have to because of the extent of the arpeggio and how fast they come. We can't, just simply play note to note, right? But we can help ourselves out a little bit and maintain a nicer sense of alignment and ability to articulate things very quietly if we don't stay so stretched from 2 to 1 on some of these that are very large. I don't know if you were doing 2 on that particular one. I did see this happen sometimes, and because your camera was so close to the left hand, it was very obvious that 5 would let go and the left side of the left hand would stay under tension and we'd stretch to 1. So despite it not sounding like it really affected you, I'd see if we can get some of those to relax a little more. Second technical thing, Bethany. Your second finger in your right hand has sometimes a habit of bending backwards when you depress a key. And that one, I'm going to give you the no-no finger because that, we don't want to do that. We don't want to have the last joint buckle. Yes. So keep an eye out for that. It wasn't like they were like it happened in fleeting moments where things were moving really quickly. It wasn't like that. They were these slower moments. And so I do think that this is something that with just a little bit of attention, you can think about not releasing or not pressing with the finger like that and not allowing that to collapse, but maintaining that good structure underneath. Yes, Bethany. Seeing yourself play is always great, right? It always uncovers something that we might not be aware of when we're in the middle of playing ourselves, right? Okay, let's talk a little bit about interpretation and your musical structure and how you've kind of set things up. First, I know this is still a new thing for you. And some of the flow that I think you're looking for is going to be aided by being able to speed this up to the tempo that's marked on the page. Right now, it's a little slow. I appreciate that because it's still in the learning phases. So it is marked 105. Yes. Okay, that is a bit quicker. I know it's going to take a little bit of time possibly to get there, but just keep your eye on that. Keep your eye on that. That's the tempo. And if you would like to, and if we have trouble kind of navigating some of the arpeggiation that quickly or getting through some of these, or, you know, some of that stuff, okay, fine. Keep it slow. Keep it at a good practice tempo because we want to maintain all of the great work that you've done. But in small doses, can we hear a little bit of the phrase a little bit more quickly? So, for example, here's back to measure 9, because this is going to also tie into the next point. So, okay, a couple missed notes there, but we get a totally different sense of the direction of the phrase if, that was a little faster than 105. This is the phrase. And we can actually hear that these stem up notes are truly connected to one another, whereas at that slower practice tempo, there's two things that are pitfalls, potential pitfalls for us. One is feeling that each of these two measured descents are kind of their own phrase, which they're not. They're all supposed to be linked together. All the way to the end. That's the first potential pitfall. The second has to do with the notes that I circled. And that is, whatever you do, make sure that you do not give us any sense that that is part of the melody. It's a little easier to get away with this last one being too loud because of the distance it is away from the rest of the melody. But that's why that pianissimo is written on the page. Make sure that those stay super, super under the level, the dynamic level of your melody. Right? And you do that nicely later on in the piece. There's a phrase that you go through, and it works really well. Some of these ones at the beginning, it sounded a lot like you were playing the melody as da 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 da. So those can be, exaggerate the difference in the dynamic between the texture. So just how quiet that is. So we can continue to hear, even though this high note is ringing and it's starting to go away, we need to continue to hear it spin over everything else that the hands are doing, right? So, Okay. Sound good, Bethany? Okay, next little segment. Okay, after this spot we just talked about. This is very interesting because potentially we've been given two duetting melodies by the composer. The top phrase definitely sounds like it ends on that G. And then we have to ask, what's happening with all the rest of that? Because the slur, this is great. This is tying into what we talked about a little bit with Rhodsey as well, because we're looking for the underlying intention given all of the information presented on the score. The slur doesn't end on G, which is interesting. If it did, all of what I circled in red should be played significantly under the dynamic of everything else, right? But it doesn't do that. So now we need to ask, well, even though these lower pitches, starting here in 14, even though these are not given a separate stem direction, is there, gosh, and even coming from here, this is fun. I'm analyzing this with you, Bethany, because I have not really taken a dive into the piece before. Does this movement, which starts here in 13, is that truly connected to the bottom of the right hand, da, 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 and then continues after the rest, da, da. And then maybe the voices unite, or the alto voice goes away and soprano takes back over again. That's where I've put this question mark. That was one marking that was originally on the page. That's all of what that meant. Yeah. Z Spark, welcome. You say, what's the little line under the finger number? Oh, and that's in measure 15. That is a tenuto mark. So a leaning accent, we could call it. Good question, Z Spark. Okay, so now if we have two melodies here, there are so many interpretive possibilities as soon as we have these two voices, because we could just choose to bring out the top one, which would be the easiest, the most expected. But what if the voices kind of trade in importance as they progress through their phrase? So that's all pretty standard, I'd say, just standard harmonization. We're moving in sixths. But here, I guess that still sounds like a sixth. But that to me sounds like one of the more dissonant, especially over C major. And then we have that clash of mixture of modes between the voices and the accompaniment. That would be an opportunity to say, does the voice that we're bringing out, can it shift to one of the other ones? Or does it start with the left-hand one? And then does it transition to the right-hand one? Do they trade places in the middle? I think there are a lot of correct answers to that. There isn't one best way to play that. And that's up to you, Bethany. But if you haven't thought about that and how these are connected and as different voices, I think that would be something to think about. Then, going into measure 15. That's a nice line. There are, I think, two ways that this could be played successfully. And let me just clear all of this for now, just so we can add some more notes. Okay. If this line that's starting from the lower voice, if that is, because it's ascending, we could potentially crescendo the entire thing to the end. If we do that, it ends up linking nicely into the next phrase. There should be a different color in the next phrase because the next phrase has a different intention and it's dramatically different harmony. Right? But we can still accomplish that, even if the voices meet near the same dynamic. Yeah? The other way would be simply doing the opposite. What if we decrescendo that phrase? Where the underlying voice just floats away. I think both of those could be great to think about. The first one will make it easier to articulate this and bring it out. The second will be more difficult to show that separation and make sure that we don't think that this is one voice singing one line, but make sure there's still two separate ones. Again, Bethany, up to you. I'm just pointing out options. Okay. Yes. Okay, getting into the next bar. I know we're spending a lot of time on the first page, but these concepts are going to apply kind of across the whole piece. When we have this big change in color that we were talking about, and you say, switched colors so suddenly, yes. I would strive, especially because the composer has shown us changes in tempo and retard throughout the score. It's not like they're missing or they're very sparsely notated. I would really try to play this more in tempo. I feel like, thinking back about your performance, that there was a slowing down, maybe. If there wasn't, forgive me for this. There's a difference between taking a retard, right, and showing separation of phrase with just a little bit of time. So make sure that when we do show this shift in color, that it's only done with a little bit of time and not an extended rubato. I don't think this would be the place to use that kind of rubato. We're going to come to a couple other places like that. All right, let's keep going. You can see I circled these again because we had a similar tendency to play those out too much. So just be sure, like before, they stay under the texture. Okay, this is a bit of a repeat. Same thing, question mark in the same place. We discussed that. Well, I did give you two options now, Bethany. We have the same thing repeated again. Maybe you choose one for the first time and the other for the second time. Here, okay, 29. This ties into this where we take rubato a little bit more. The composer has not marked any slowing down for us through these measures. I wouldn't take too much time. And that's why I wrote in direction and moving forward to make sure that we continue to hear these phrases. The composition itself is already taken care of, showing us into the next segment because of the dynamic and the decrescendo. I mean, perhaps like the slightest... There it is. The slightest little pulling back at the end might be nice. But I wouldn't do a big expansive. What you played was very musical, but I don't think it is the composer's intention. Because I think if she wanted that much of a retard, she would have written it. Okay. Next segment. This is a little bit of a repeat. And then it changes. Some very interesting harmony. Such a nice chord to end on. I wasn't planning actually on saying anything about this, but starting in 38, I think there's an opportunity to show a little more ping on these top notes. I think this could go both ways. The composer has given us that slur, and it's a decrescendo. So it could be played very smoothly, which is like what you did. But you could also, I think, accurately and with justification, experiment with a little more brightness on each of these attacks, almost like they're little bells. I know people know this composition. Right? But did you actually know that La Campanella is the little bell? So, that does break the finger legato. I think it's something that you could experiment with, though, Bethany. Okay. Rhodsey, I'll come back to that in a second. Next page. This was better, and I didn't mark these inner notes. I'm marking them now just for you to see. I didn't mark them because this was that phrase where they were really nicely placed underneath the texture. Oh, here's another place. Forward direction. We took a lot of rubato here, and we took time away. Because the composer didn't give it to us, I don't think I would do that. Two things. It could either be a very, very slight feeling of push against us. So that has a little bit of a slowdown, but it still feels like we're going to the downbeat of 48. Versus that has a lot of writ, and it loses that direction. So we can still have a little rubato, but show more forward direction because the composer didn't give us a retard. Also, I think if we don't do too much there, to me, this next section is really about feeling pulse and the exploration of harmony. So and pay close attention to the slurs and the stem up pitches, because we have, starting in 49, dum, da, dum, bum, da, dum, right? Ba, dum. That's the melodic movement. Dotted half, quarter half. I heard you bring that out sometimes, Bethany. Okay, I see you, Bethany. Sometimes I heard you bring out those upper notes, but I think if we could pay a little bit more attention to that and make sure that the stem downs are truly still shown. So, dum, da, dum. Da-dum, dum, da-dum. Yeah. Okay. Just real quick, Bethany. Here in 57 and then again in 59, take a little bit of a look and maybe a little bit more practice with these two bars. Because as we were listening, we lost the sense of where the true pulse was and where the natural accents occur. So make sure those 16th notes, that's really the culprit here. that those stay nice and in rhythm and where they're supposed to be. It'll give us a little different sense of rhythm going through there and the purpose of the phrase. Okay, we're almost wrapped up, Bethany. Okay, getting into the next page. We've got some of this same idea. Yes. So here, right where I just played, I had written bigger color change opportunity. I think this would be a spot, even though it's not marked, that we could take a hair more time than you did. Because we're coming out of so much forward movement and feeling this kind of sense of syncopation. And then it settles. And we can make that, the downbeat of 73, we could make that so dramatically different. Those chords lead us there so nicely, and then yeah. Okay. Potentially the last thing, possibly the last thing. Bethany, you made a wonderful crescendo starting here, but it was very driven by all of the left-hand movement. And the left hand got a bit pokey and a little distracting from what was going on in the top of the right hand. And so that's why I wrote right idea, but do less leading with the left hand. So, oops, it's tied. To B flat on the next page. So really giving a focus, giving the crescendo focus to the melody first and foremost, secondarily the right hand texture, and making sure that continues to sing, and let the left hand just play a supporting role through that so that we don't get distracted by that getting a bit aggressive as we lead back around and back into, where we're going next. Okay. Yes. Lovely job, Bethany, in 83, giving the writ where it's marked. If you go back and you take a listen to the computer-generated recording from the composer of this piece, I think there was an error in the score. I think there's supposed to be an a tempo marked here because her recording goes right back. Right back into the original tempo. So that would be something else to work on. I know that this is by far, we have the longest, maybe and most difficult runs. Lovely job with those scales at the end. That cannot sight read as well. Yes, lovely job. Just if it stays more in tempo, then we'll be doing the right thing through the end of this piece. So keep the tempo pushing forward, and don't let it do too much. Maybe until the end of that. And then I still think 95. This should still be tempo because we want it to be reminiscent of bar 1. And then the resolution starts here, and we can take some time. And let that happen. Yes. Okay. Hello, Christopher. Okay, Bethany, if you can't respond, I hope I covered everything for you. And I hope this was, helpful. If you can't not ask any follow-up questions here, please feel free to, send me over an email if there's anything that wasn't clear, or if you have another question about. But let's give Bethany another round of applause. Really, really fine work. We were just tidying up the details. Yeah. What a day. Wonderful. Well, thanks. Great. Yeah. Thanks so much for everybody that has stuck around for the 2 hours. We are not going to have a chance today to do any live questions from everybody. But I do imagine that the next stream we will. And so if you have questions, the next stream is October 9th. So be sure, especially if this is your first time, welcome. Thanks for sticking around. And be sure and tune back in on the 9th. Usually in the title of these lives, if it says Masterclass, that means I'm talking about submissions from one of you. If you would like to send something in the way Bethany and Antonio and Rhodsey did, there are some directions for how to do that in the description of this video below. And we'd be happy to hear you play and listen to you. Yes, Nancy says, hit the thumbs up before you go. Thank you. Thumbs up, not the thumbs down. Yes, so thanks, Ricardo. Thanks so much for being here. And Bedlington Groomer, David, Whitney. It's lovely to meet you, Whitney. Dith, Nancy. Yeah. Great to see everybody. We're gonna wrap it up. I don't think Bethany can chat. Yes, Whitney. Well, yeah, my pleasure. Looking forward to seeing you again on a stream sometime soon. Okay. Yeah, I don't have any other announcements today. This has been a fun stream, talking about a lot of different stuff. Dith, off to go choose level 6. Congratulations, Dith. We're looking forward to hearing what you pick. Rhodsey. If you think that your wrist is sore from martial arts, then take a break for a little bit. Yeah. Because it is piano playing, because of the tension, could be aggravating it a little bit because of the tension you're playing with. But it's, I don't think what you're doing is going to cause pain like that. Not in the bottom. Not the bottom of the thumb. So I would take a look at your martial arts technique and maybe take a few days rest and let things get back to normal. Yeah. Rhodsey, I have, but not in any way that I'd ever want anyone to see. Oh, thanks, Z-Spark. Thank you, Z-Spark. Thanks for being here. And Seth. Yeah, great. Okay. All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. Practice smarter, not harder. And I will see you hopefully in the next stream or in the next video. It's always good to see all of you, my friends. All right. All right, everybody. Take care. Have a great rest of your day. Sleep well if you're in Europe. And see you next time.